Hello and welcome back to one last video for this year. Basically, it's just some blatant excuse for me to rank the companion exits from Doctor Who, all the way from Susan, all the way to Yaz and Dan, who unfortunately are not in this tier list just simply because it was made before that. But post Revolution of the Daleks, so Graham and Ryan are in this list. I'm decided to take in chronological order because there's a different approach from different showrunners to how they did companion exits. Really, Verity Lambert, for example, is very character focused. Is why I enjoy the exits from her era so much. Rusty Davies is, and I think most of the New Who companions are very much in that character driven mindset. But throughout the classic series, that was not always the case, especially in the 70s. I will have an absolute rant about Leela in due time. I've also got perfect, fantastic, good, serviceable, meh, non-applicable because there are some off-screen exits, so that will be Ace. Although I have seen read a very good comic that does Ace's exit, but it's not on screen, so I will not be counting it. And of course, Liz Shaw. So we'll start off with Susan, who I've got to be honest, I think is good. It's a good exit there. Is there a wider discussion to be had about how many of the original companions, the female companions, are just sort of married off out of nowhere? Yes, there is definitely discussion to be had about that, but I think that for that idea, this is fundamentally one of the best bits of execution we got for that. I really enjoy. I think it's because it's in Susan's character. When it happens with Vicky later down the line, it doesn't work for me. But it's in Susan's character that she wants to find roots, that she wants to really carve out a life for herself, basically. And I think that she sort of finds that in Dalek Invasion of Earth with David. Is that rushed a little bit? Absolutely yes. But we've only got 6 parts, and this is not a story where we can. There is no Doctor Who story where you can do that unless you're doing a story like Marco Polo, where Susan and David would be together for 6 months before that decision's made. It's gonna be rushed. It's gonna feel like it's a short period of time. But I feel like in stories we have to just let that happen sometimes. In superhero films, in films in general, romances happen incredibly quickly, and they do that because that's just how it has to be for the story. We can't spend all that time with these characters. I think this is a fundamentally good one. I think it's because of a couple of things. The emotion is really obvious in the performances from Susan and from William Hartnell, particularly from William Hartnell. That speech at the end is amazing. It's so good, and you can tell that it's not just the Doctor losing his granddaughter. That William Hartnell really, really liked working with Caroline Ford. He really cared about Caroline Ford. And you can tell that there's very little acting actually involved in that scene. It's perfect. And again, it's Verity Lambert, so they really care about the characters, and it's just I'm looking for the words here. We stop the plot of Dalek Invasion of Earth probably 10 minutes before the end of the episode in part 6, and we just focus on these characters as they say goodbye. We get time to mull over what this decision will mean for all of the parties involved, and it's something that permeates straight through to Ian and Barbara's exit, which I'm just going to chuck straight in. Fantastic. I'll cover both of them at once because they both leave together. I think this is one of the best exits of the 60s for my money. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. It's joyous. It's sad, but it's joyous. I love that the actual exit takes place kind of off screen. Their goodbye with the Doctor kind of takes place off screen, but you get a sense of how angry he was, when they first suggested they want to go home, because of how dangerous it was, but also how disappointed he was. I feel like he'd become so accustomed to their presence that he kind of forgot that they did want to go home for a long time. They sort of had abandoned that idea, but when they had the chance, they took it. And the Doctor really couldn't even blame them for taking that opportunity. And it is really well done. I love seeing all the images of them back in London, 1965. It's so delightful and warm, and the pigeons when they're on the bus. It's delightful. And again, we stop the plot ages before the end of the episode, so we can just spend time with them for the last time, and I think it's a fantastic departure for both Jacqueline Hill and William Russell. Yeah, I'll stick it in fantastic. Vicky, meh. It's like Susan, apart from there is no reason why Vicky would ever have wanted to stay behind. You never got the sense that she was just gonna try and put down roots in ancient Troy. I literally like 4 episodes, not 4 episodes, but 4 stories before when Ian and Barbara leave. The doctor's like, the doctor says to Vicky, "Oh, I assume you want to go with him, child." And she's like, "Oh, why would I want to leave? What's there in their time for me? I want to stay with you." And it feels really out of character that happens. Yeah, I don't like Troilus is fine, although interesting name for a character from Troy. All that stuff. It's all right. I don't think it's terrible. There's certainly worse companion exits out there, but it just feels like it was underserved, and it's literally the first story into the new era, the John Wiles era. Verity Lambert left literally the episode before her final story kicks in, and you can tell Verity Lambert would absolutely not have had her just leave like that. And it's a shame that Maureen Abraham is kind of forced off the show because, well, I'm not even sure why, but no one's really sure to this day. William Hartnell was furious, apparently, that she was sort of removed without her knowledge. So yeah, Katerina, I mean, fantastic. This should have been Vicky's exit. Hot take, possibly. Vicky should have died in the Dalek Master Plan. If you want to get rid of her, this would have been insane if they had actually gone the full mile and killed off a companion midway through the story. And they do kill off a companion midway through the story. But it's not a companion you really care about. It's not a companion you really know. You've only met Katerina. What was it? She dies in episode 4 of the Dalek Master Plan. She's only introduced in episode 3 or 4 of the Mythmaker. So she's really only been around for a handful of episodes in which she's done basically nothing apart from sort of think the doctor's a god and that she's on her way to heaven, and basically show a complete lack of understanding for the situation that she's in. She's nice enough, and it gets fantastic because it's a shocking exit. Like it really packs. You're stunned by it. It packs a punch. When she goes out of that airlock, but it's not as impactful as it should be because we don't know or care about this character. Had they held on to Vicky for a couple more episodes, this would have been probably the greatest Doctor Who companion exit ever. It's like Adric if we actually liked Adric. That would be what this was like in the middle of the 60s, which were kind of quite cozy as well. It would have been ridiculous, but they didn't go down that route. I noticed this tier list doesn't appear to have Sarah Kingdom. Sarah Kingdom gets chucked in the fantastic column as well, although she's not on this list for reasons that I have no idea. She would be put in this fantastic column as well. Her death at the end of the Dalek Master Plan, much more shocking because you care about the character. Sarah was just a much better character than Katerina. She was much better suited to the show. It kind of felt like we had more time with her and the Doctor, with her and Stephen, and it really hit. Actually, it might get chucked into perfect. It really is gobsmacking exit. What will be chucked in perfect is the first exit for Stephen in the massacre. Now, for companions, we've got multiple exits. We've gone to the person who made this has gone to the bother of making multiple endings for them. So Rory's got 3, Clara's got 4. Frankly, she could have more than that. Nardole and Bill have 2 apiece. Sarah Jane's got 2 different ones from her, one from the classic series and her one from the new series. Harry, Perry, the Brigadier, all these characters have multiple exits, and I'm glad that they've gone to that, because I do have different feelings towards these different things. The massacre, actually, it can't go imperfect. It hasn't gone fantastic. It is a perfect exit with one fact: he doesn't leave. The fact that there is another exit is what takes this down. The massacre is basically a Stephen Taylor solo story. He's brilliant in it, and that final confrontation that he has with William Hartnell, where he says, basically accuses him of treating all the people he meets as experiments and not really caring about these people because they've just abandoned this girl in Paris to be murdered. And that's what William Hartnell says, he's right. That he says that I was right to do what I do because, he's not screwing with history. He's not messing about with anything. And Stephen is furious, and it would have been an amazing send off. There's kind of a bitterness and a regret, but also a real, genuine rage. And it's a brilliant scene, which is just so unfortunately undercut literally about 3 minutes after it ends, because Stephen just sort of runs back into the TARDIS, and then we just move on like it had never happened, because Dodo is a descendant of the girl from France, possibly. It should not have been screwed up. This should have been his exit, and it would have been one of the, if not the greatest companion exit of all time. To just go out in anger with the Doctor would have been a brilliant way to do things, but unfortunately that's not how it worked out. I do think Stephen's actual exit is pretty serviceable. Yes, it comes out of nowhere, but I have a bit of a soft spot for the Savages. I think it's a really underrated story. And I like that it's not the Doctor that suggests that Stephen should be, because for some reason I had it in my head that the Doctor was the one who suggests that Stephen should become the leader of these two people, but actually it's the Savages themselves. I can't remember what the guy's name is, the guy who leads the Savages, and Janus, who agrees with it, because of his actions in that final fight in the Savages. He's sort of made their leader, sort of the bridge between these two people, and help to rebuild their society. And I think it's well done enough. Like, yes, it's tagged on to the end. It doesn't feel like a story that focuses on Stephen. Any good companion exit is from a story that focuses on those characters. That's just the rules. But it is tagged on, but I do like it. Dodo. I'm tempted to put it in non-applicable because it doesn't really have an exit. Why is bad and the worst? Surely that's the wrong way around. Just a thought. I'll chuck it in bad. Like, I don't know. It doesn't actively make me angry. I'm sure it actively made Jackie Lane angry. I feel really bad for her but she's just not a good character. Dodo was deeply annoying, and the fact that she's just removed off screen basically, and it's just she's gone now. Actually, it probably should be put non-applicable. The fact that the whole idea is just she's gone, she's not there. She's decided to stay in England off screen, and the Doctor can have Ben and Polly now. Never annoys me as much as it should, because A, I don't like Dodo, and B, I really like Ben and Polly, and I just feel like I get an upgrade out of the whole system. The fact is, the Doctor doesn't seem to really care. Dodo didn't really like her anyway, so none of this really matters to me. It's off screen, but it doesn't annoy me. It should, but it never does. Ben and Polly get chucked into bad, brilliant companions who just leave at the end of a story where they had almost nothing to do. Like, they are genuinely not in the back half of the story. I don't just mean like they're knocking about doing plot details that are not really important, or even just standing about asking questions. They're actually not in episodes 4 to 6, apart from the scene at the very, very end where they leave. That is it. And it feels cheap and hollow. The fact that they just go back to their lives, I like that. I'm totally good with that. But the fact that it's so half-arsed and poorly played out. And again, I just feel like in Verity Lambert's era, like Ian, Barbara, Susan, they got exits from writers that clearly cared about those characters. And this is just blatantly not bothered whatsoever. They only wanted to write Ben out. They didn't want to write Polly out. Annette Willis decided to go with Michael Craze. She didn't want to carry on without him, basically because the writers decided Jamie was an upgrade of Ben, which they weren't wrong about. But so it's annoying behind the scenes stuff that they meant they had to go. And then the actual exit itself is it's basically a non-entity. They just leave. And then the Doctor and Jamie walk off into the plot of Evil of the Daleks. And that's it. Strange decision making at the top. I don't understand. But thankfully, the rest of the 60s companions all get brilliant exits. Chuck and Victoria, fantastic. Watched Through from the Deep the other day. this is a story that really focuses on Victoria, and I've always really liked Victoria, and I like her for one specific reason. She doesn't really have a choice in traveling with the Doctor. She's a reluctant companion by design. You know, when people say, "Oh, she screams all the time," she's always terrified. That's the point. That is the entire point of her character. And I don't just mean that's her plot function. I mean, this is a girl who, you know, in our very first story, a bit like Vicky actually, her father is killed by the Daleks, and she's essentially adopted by the Doctor and Jamie, and she hangs around. She hangs around for a whole season really, because she loves the Doctor and Jamie. She loves spending time with them. She does love the interest and the adventure and going to all these different places. But what she doesn't love is what the Doctor and Jamie have kind of started to really enjoy, which is the danger. She hates the fact that they just jump from one horrible place to another. And I think the rapid onslaught of Enemy of the World, you know, when they're nearly getting tortured at one point, and then Web of Fear, where they're getting chased around the underground, and then Fury from the Deep. She's just so tired of being terrified all the time. And you can tell that it's a decision that hurts her to make. It's not just a half-arsed, oh, you know, we're back in my own time now. Well, she's not back in her own time. It's not just like a half-arsed, I don't want to do this anymore. Goodbye. It really hurts her to leave the Doctor and especially Jamie. And it's a really interesting approach to a companion departure because it focuses more on how Jamie will be affected by her leaving than it focuses on how the Doctor will be affected. Normally, we focus on the Doctor rather than the other companion when we do these exits, but it really focuses on Jamie. And you know, you can talk about Ten and Rose on that beach all you want. Where it's really at is Victoria and Jamie looking at each other as the second Doctor rows away, and Jamie is looking back across, and Victoria's on the beach looking towards Jamie. Like that's a proper beach goodbye. That it's top notch. Jamie and Zoe. The perfect tier is almost going to be exclusively occupied by uh, companion exits where the companion gets their memory wiped, because both of these characters lose two, you know, a series in Zoe's case, nearly 3 series in Jamie's case worth character development, and they forget all about, you know, all their adventures. They remember meeting the Doctor, so Jamie still remembers the events of the Highlanders. He still remembers meeting Ben and Polly, but as far as he's aware, never went in the TARDIS, never went anywhere. And Zoe, as well, you know, she still remembers the wheel in space. She still remembers all the hijinks with the Cybermen, so her memory will still pair up with all the people around her. But she doesn't remember going off with the Doctor. She doesn't remember all those things she did, and neither of them remember how much they grew as people. Jamie forgets that the Doctor became his best friend. He forgets meeting Zoe and how much they got on. He forgets Victoria, who he was blatantly in love with. He forgets all these things. And Zoe, you know, this character who worried that she couldn't connect to other people, who was worried that she was becoming a bit of a robot. In her last story in the War Games, you know, she becomes a leader, and she all of that is robbed from her by the Time Lords, and it's a devastating exit. It's so brutally underplayed by the story. Terrance Dick's brilliant writing. They just sort of have like this lukewarm goodbye with the second Doctor, but we can't drag it out because of just the way that it's written is so brutal and sudden, and you think, oh, they're going to get away. It's all going to be good. They're going to get away again, and they don't, and all of that gets robbed from them, and that's why it's such a fantastic exit. Liz Shaw is off screen, so there's not much to say about that. I'm fine with it being off screen. Like, Caroline John didn't come back because she was pregnant, and there were elements that the producers felt didn't work with her character, none of which was Caroline John's fault, and more just about the new formula of the show. It's pretty much the same thing that happened with Harry Sullivan, which I'll explain later. But with Caroline John's case and Liz, you know, they brought in a sciencey character thinking that, oh, this is a really good new dynamic. But unfortunately, that sort of deters the whole point of what a companion was there for at that point, which was to ask the questions. And John Pertwee was so scientific and all of that stuff was so focused that it didn't really work as a Doctor companion dynamic. And I never really see it as a Doctor companion dynamic. You know, Liz Shaw's the only person on this list who does not Actually, Mike as well. But at any point, travel on the TARDIS. She's the only person who we consider as a companion who doesn't travel on the TARDIS. She's the Doctor's work colleague, basically. She's great, but it's not. It's an off-screen exit. It's entirely kind of by the by. The best companion exit in the entirety of Doctor Who, classic and new, is Jo Grant. Now, I know I've said that there's a bit of an endemic of sort of pairing off companions in their last story, giving them a romance, especially if they're a female character. Now that there's wider issues with that. What strikes me about this one is just how well played that romance is within the context of the story. This is something that you watch slowly envelop, a bit like Susan and David, but because Jo and Cliff are older, it doesn't just feel like, well, this is a romantic teenage thing. This feels like two actual adults. Yes, they fall in love very quickly. I will take all of those criticisms, but I just think it's so incredibly well played by the pair of them. Jo Grant is my favorite companion. She's one of my favorite characters in TV ever, and her exit never fails to get me. Never. It is absolutely exceptionally played by Katie Manning and Jon Pertwee. The raising of the glass from Jon Pertwee as he walks out and he drives off into the sunset, and it's dead silence. And the fact that it just feels like the Doctor loses his daughter, that's what it feels like to me. The fledgling flies the coop. That's the entire vibe that I get from this exit. And I just think it's absolutely perfect. It really is. Mike Yates in Planet of the Spider. This is pretty much non-applicable. His exit is entirely off screen. Actually, I'll chuck it in serviceable, because I like that he's sort of redeemed after what happens with him in Invasion of the Dinosaurs. It's good to spend more time with him, and he gets a really good, nice last story, but he's only in a couple of the episodes, and I wish we kind of got something more definitive to close out his story. Actually, chuck it in there. I wish we had something more definitive to close out his story, but it's fine. Terror of the Zygons for Harry and the Brigadier. I'll chuck Harry and Serviceable and the Brigadier in good. Why? I think the final scene works really well because Brigadier gets the last line. This final thing of him watching out as the TARDIS disappears in the forest in Scotland. It doesn't really work as well for Harry because Harry's been a companion for a whole series, and it just feels a bit weird that he just sort of leaves. It's not bad, but it's sort of just in the middle. Benton and Harry in the Android Invasion, both of which really disappoint me. The Android Invasion is not a story that I really particularly like, and I think it's really cheap that neither of these characters gets a proper goodbye. They're both good in the story, but neither of them gets a proper goodbye. Maybe that's because it wasn't considered at the time to be their final story. I don't know. I don't think that they were aware that John Levine or Ian Marter wouldn't be coming back to the show at any point. So they probably didn't write a goodbye on those reasons. But in hindsight, that's just disappointing to me. Sarah Jane, fantastic. Sarah Jane's exit in The Hand of Fear is one of the best played bits of TV that I've seen from the 70s. To be honest with you, I think both Elizabeth Sladen and Tom Baker are outstanding. It clearly goes beyond acting to the deep bond that those two actors had with one another. It's really, really well played. I love the fact that it takes place in the wooden TARDIS. I don't know why, but it just increases the somber attitude. Some of the dialogue is just beautiful. And then it has like a nice laugh at the end as Sarah goes out and realizes that she's not where the Doctor said she was. He's not in South Croydon. He's not leaving her there, which is well paid off later when it turns out she was actually in Aberdeen. I knew I was going to do this eventually, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready. One of my favorite companions in all of Doctor Who. There's Jo Grant, and there's Jamie, and there's Ian, and there's Sarah. And later on down the line, there's Romana and Amy and Ace, and there's the Brigadier. But I love, as much as almost any of them, I love Leela. And this enrages me. when I say that Vicky is out of character to fall in love and exit, it's a little bit out of character. It suits Jo. It suits Susan. It is baffling that they thought that was a good decision for Leela. And there is an off-screen reason Louise Jameson decided to leave. The arrogant is probably the only word. Maybe not arrogant. Naive producers of Doctor Who at the time thought they could persuade her otherwise, that she didn't need to leave because they didn't want to get another companion. They thought she was great. They wanted to keep her, which is understandable. But for that reason, they didn't bother writing her an exit story. And they didn't want to kill her off, which is what she wanted. So instead, they didn't. There's no exit. Invasion of Time is a terrible, terrible, terrible story. But even within the confines of that, this is like a new low. And I say that knowing in full view that is a story involving Scottish state people, awful Sontarans, 2 episodes of running around the TARDIS and Sontarans tripping over random bits of furniture. This is a new low for that. She has no connection with Android. There's not even any build-up. They don't know. Do they even share scenes together? She just decides that she's going to stay on Gallifrey, which one is flipping hilarious considering the Doctor wouldn't even take Sarah Jane to Gallifrey, with good flipping reason, because look what they did to Jamie and Zoe. But he just decides to leave her on Gallifrey with Android. It's an insult to the character that they thought that was in any way acceptable, although they thought that was in any way in keeping with anything we knew about the badass female warrior character, that she just randomly saddles up with this random Gallifreyan bureaucrat. It's not like there wasn't a potential exit story in there. Leela makes a really good friend with a female time lady who basically goes on to influence Romana, and she goes out and meets with the Shobogans and they fights with them. She could have joined a tribe on Gallifrey, or she could have just died. It would have made the story remarkably better and added some actual stakes to those dumb Sontarans with Cockney accents. But this is just an insult. It enrages me that they did this. Another one of my favourite companions. Another bad exit. Romana. It's not terrible. I like that her arc kind of does go somewhere. In the East-Space trilogy, the Time Lords want her back. Romana, who arrived in season 16 as this snooty, straight out of the Academy Time Lord, who was kind of talked down to the Doctor, has become so in love with that lifestyle that she says, I don't want to spend the rest of my life on Gallifrey. And I like that she takes an opportunity to stay in the East-Space universe so that the Time Lords can't get her back. But it's just so underplayed. Like, she decides to stay to help these people, which is a kind of a recurring thing. It happens to Stephen, it happens to Nyssa, where they stay for some sort of altruistic purpose. But it's just, there's no, considering how strong the bond between her and the Fourth Doctor was, they don't seem to particularly care. And I know why that was. It was because JNT didn't particularly like either of these characters, and frankly, JNT didn't like character drama particularly, unless that character drama was characters just bickering for no reason in the TARDIS. And there's one nice little bit where, the Doctor says, Kanan asks the Doctor, will she be okay? Or is it Adric? I don't know, one of those. No, it's Adric. Adric asks him, will Romana be okay? And the Doctor says, she'll be fantastic. That's a really lovely bit. But they don't have a goodbye. It's not even like Ian and Barbara, where there's like an off-screen goodbye. They just don't have a goodbye. They just depart. And that's it. And that's really disappointing me, because they had such a close connection. They had brilliant chemistry. And again, Lalla Ward was written out because JNT believed that the Time Lady and the robot dog were not relatable enough companions, and then decided to replace them with Adric, who's a mathematical genius from another universe, and Nyssa, who's a science genius from another planet, and a gobby Australian air hostess, because they're all really relatable characters to British audiences at the time. Adric, it's fantastic. It probably would be imperfect if I actually cared about Adric. I find Adric quite annoying in a lot of stories up until about Black Orchid, and then he's good in Earthshock. He's really good in Earthshock. And this death is shocking, genuinely jaw-dropping. The way that the music doesn't come in and we cut to that badge, or when he dies and Nyssa just sort of turns and cries on Tegan's shoulder. It's either that or it's the other way around, and you just hear the little notes of the Alzarius theme from the East Base trilogy, which played when his brother died. It's really well done. Actually, do you know what? I don't care. I don't care if I don't like Adric that much. It's worthy of being put in the perfect tier. It really is. It's a fantastic, fantastic goodbye. Unlike Time Flight, where Tegan just leaves, and we all know she'll be back in the next story. I've got nothing to say about this. Nyssa. It's a bit meh, because again, a character leaves with very little build-up and nobody cares. It's done for good altruistic reasons. All that stuff's nice, but again, nobody really seems to care all that much, apart from potentially Tegan, who apparently is really close to Nyssa, but frankly, that was never really shown. And I think because we've got Turlough, for some reason, it doesn't feel like there's much going on, because it feels like she's leaving in the middle of a story, because we've still got the Black Guardian trilogy going on. I just never got particularly attached to Nyssa. She was a good concept of a companion who never really went anywhere. I think that does affect things. Like, I'm looking at the top tiers here, and with the exception of Adric and Katarina, these are the best. So these are some of the best companions. And that does play a part. I never just got particularly connected to Nyssa. Maybe it could be put in serviceable, but I don't know. I really don't. Resurrection of the Daleks, I do. It's fantastic. I even love Tegan. I think Tegan's all right companion, probably the best of the Fifth Doctor's era, but never particularly to my taste. But man alive, is her exit brilliant. Resurrection of the Daleks is a brutal, grim story, and Tegan gets put through hell and watches man after man after man gunned down and killed, and she just decides she's had enough, and it's so brutal and underplayed, and she's just said, I've seen too much death. It stopped being fun. And it's really and it's the only companion exit where I feel like Peter Davison really cares. Like, he's clearly shocked by Adric's death, but in the next story he's just sort of fine. And Nyssa, he didn't seem too bothered, and Turlough later on down the line he's almost a bit proud of. This hurt him. It really did. And it's good to see, because I don't think Peter Davison got to express any emotions a lot of the time, and it was really nice to see that. Turlough's sort of fine, serviceable. He leaves to become a prince of his own people or something. It's a thing. The Doctor's kind of proud of him for finally achieving some potential and stop being a coward and accept some responsibility, which you could say is a closure to an arc, but I'm not sure there was really an arc to get there. It just sort of happened, but it's pretty decent. Yeah, I'll chuck in serviceable. Mind Warp for Perry Brown. Fantastic. Brutal, shocking, jaw-dropping TV that is immediately undercut by a terrible decision to retcon her death in the Ultimate Foe. Now, personally, this is all my headcanon. The Time Lords lied in the Ultimate Foe because they realized that they'd majorly screwed up, and they decided to tell the Doctor this lie about her becoming a princess and falling in love with Brian Blessed, and sort of hope that he would go, oh, it's okay, I've got this shiny new companion now. I'll just hope the old one's fine. So to me, this is still her exit. Mind Warp is still her exit, and like I said, brutal, blunt, violating. Her body is overtaken by a repulsive creature, and it's just stunning TV. And probably the only reason it's not perfect is simply because it is always slightly tainted, even if in with my headcanon, by the Ultimate Foe. Mel, meh. It's like, it's fine. There's a really nice look. Like, this is one of the few examples where they've actually shown a picture from her exit in this tier list. That's the final look she gives the Doctor. It's really nice, but she does kind of just leave out of nowhere. I'm not attached enough to Mel to really give a toss. Brigadier in Battlefield, lovely, really lovely. Couldn't even move into fantastic. It was clearly the final time they were planning on using the character, although they didn't kill him off, which they originally planned to do. But he gets so much good stuff to do in Battlefield. You know, the get off my world, the this isn't how you're supposed to be, you're supposed to die in bed. All of that stuff is just magnificent. And it's a really just nice last scene with the Brigadier sort of ordering the Doctor and Amstelin to just do stuff because he can't bother to do it himself. It's very in character, because at the start of the story he was bemoaning the fact that he used to just be able to say, you know, Sergeant Benton, do this, and they would do it for him. And yeah, it's weird. It's a weird exit because it's not really intended as an exit. It's just a nice last chapter. It's more of a last time seeing the character, and it's really good at that. Ace's exit is off screen, but I've read a really good comic where she gets killed, which is excellent. And it's a perfect goodbye, but I'm not counting it, unfortunately. Adam, is it an exit? Meh. Like, the whole point of Adam was to be a bad companion. He was a bad companion and he got kicked out. It shows the Doctor being brutal and bang on the money about people, although it is kind of slightly undercut by the fact that Rose cocks up majorly next week and the Doctor's just like, oh, poor you. Tough luck, Adam. The Ninth Doctor was very antagonistic towards men in general. If you'd been a 19-year-old blonde girl from London, you'd been absolutely fine. Jack Harkness in his original exit in The Parting of the Ways, really good, really good. The undertones about his feelings for the Doctor, unrequited feelings, the way he feels about Rose, how much the Doctor's changed him in such a short period of time, you know, giving his life, being so willing to sacrifice himself, you know, so the Doctor can finish that thing and end the Daleks. It's just so well done. When he gets brought back to life and the Doctor just abandons him, like that is brutal, considering what he's just done in the context of that story. Really good stuff. Really good stuff. Sarah Jane. I suppose I'm counting her exit as the end of time. I'll just go good because it's a really nice final scene for her in the show. I know she had more stuff outside the Sarah Jane Adventures. Sarah Elizabeth Sladen's acting is impeccable in that scene. She is outstanding. That little look she gives the Doctor as she knows what he's going to do is just amazing. Really nice last scene. Mickey. I don't know what exit they're talking about. You see, I think Mickey has an excellent exit in both. Well, probably his first 3 exits. He kind of has 4 exits. I know we make jokes about Clara, but Mickey leaves. I'll chuck him in good. Mickey leaves first at the end of Age of Steel. I think it's a really good exit. He's then sort of there at the end of Doomsday. Again, decent exit. And Journey's End is again a decent exit. Probably the exit where he finally moves past Rose completely, like different universe completely. I think his final scene in the End of Time is fine. I'm not really sure what exit I'm ranking here. I'll chuck him in good as like an average median of all of his performances. Doomsday, also good. Would be higher if I cared about the Rose 10th Doctor romance. But even as someone who really doesn't like Series 2 Rose, who really despises the idea of a 10th Doctor Rose romance or a Doctor companion romance, in general, to be totally honest with you, I think this is really well played, brilliantly acted. RTD nails it, and I love, and I cannot understate enough, love that the Doctor didn't say the word "I love you." That it cut out one, it works as a really brilliant bit of drama, and two, it allows those of us, people like me, to pretend and delude ourselves that he wasn't going to say "I love you" back. I know he was going to. I'm 100% sure that is exactly what happens. But I still think this is a really fundamentally good exit. In fact, no, I'm going to chuck it another up into the fantastic. I think it's a brilliant exit for Companion. Brutal, um, emotional, even for someone who doesn't care about all that stuff. I think it's a really, really strong exit. Unfortunately, it's not her actual exit because she does have another one that sort of craps all over this one. But we'll get to that. Last, the Time Lord's Jack. Again, good. Actually, you know what? I've been too generous to some of the stuff in this. It's not in the same tier as Victoria's exit. Last, the Time Lord's Jack is a really, really strong exit. I think it builds on what was in Torchwood Series 1, which was Jack sort of taking his team for granted, just wanting to get back to the Doctor. And it took the events of the Series 3 finale to really hammer home to Jack that he wants to stay in Torchwood, that those people have become his family. That Gwen, Owen, Tosh, Yanto, they've become his family now. And then the Doctor doesn't really fit in the Doctor's world anymore, not the way that he used to, I don't think. And I think it's a really, really good exit for him. I know there's kind of another couple of exits for him, but he doesn't really get an exit. He's in End of Time for like 30 seconds and gets laid, and he's in Revolution of the Daleks, and he doesn't actually have an exit in that. So to me, this is sort of the goodbye to the character, because it's when he leaves the TARDIS. Definitively, it's when he stops traveling with the Doctor. So, that's definitely a very good point. I maybe should use that as for Mickey as well. Keep him in good. Probably use that as the marker, when they leave the TARDIS and stop being a companion. Last, the Time Lords. Really good. Really strong companion exit from Martha, getting to decide, you know what, I'm sticking Victoria up in the top tier. I don't care. Just getting to decide that she wants to leave the Doctor. Getting, it's the way she phrases it as getting out, I just think it really works. It's really underplayed by comparison to the complete soap opera theatrics of Doomsday. Tennant and Freeman have been playing really well. There's not a lot to say about it. It's just really nice, and it's a very different approach that we haven't really seen too much of in modern Who, where Companion just goes, no, not anymore. I've had enough. And she doesn't do that because she doesn't like the danger. I think she kind of does, but then that's also part of what's worrying her. And the events of the Series 3 finale are just absolutely devastating for her, what happens to her family. So absolutely the right decision. She gets engaged in the end of The Doctor's Daughter. I don't know why this one's been counted, to be totally honest with you, because she actually has a couple more appearances after this. It's chuck it in serviceable. She once again leaves the TARDIS. I suppose that's why she once again leaves the TARDIS after a couple of episodes as a companion. But the fact is, she was always going to get a couple more episodes. She was always going to leave. She was never coming back in on a permanent basis. I think it'd be cool if she did, but she didn't. But once again, it's just her. It's basically a repeat of this, but this time she's doing it for a bloke, which doesn't play as well. Journey's End. Bad, but not the worst, because someone with a bit of sanity, Russell T Davies's background staff, told him to cut a scene that he'd originally written where the Doctor gives Rose and the Metacrisis Doctor a bit of TARDIS for them to grow so they can go and have adventures together for the rest of their lives. It's too perfect. She gets the Doctor that will age with her, which solves all these issues. It gives her the perfect ending, and it just makes Tennant's life look crap because he actually has to literally watch as this Metacrisis Doctor gets rewarded for his genocide by literally getting to live Tennant's dream of going off with Rose forever. And it's baffling that was the decision that they went for. I think it's easily the worst companion exit in the Revive series. Easily. Like, it tries. I'll give it, it tries, which is more than could be said for Ryan's exit, for example. But I'm not having that. I think it's an absolute rubbish. Donna, you know what I said about Jamie and Zoe and losing all their character development and how much that hurts? That's Donna. That it's rough. It's really rough. It sort of takes the template of the Jamie and Zoe exit, but whilst that's underplayed, this is, well, it's a Russell T Davies exit, so it's melodramatic as anything. The big swirling music and the doctor and Donna turning up on Wilf's doorstep, and like all the brilliant scenes at the end, and that final goodbye is gut wrenching, absolutely heartbreaking. I think really good companion exits, and I'm using these as benchmark, but some of these as well. The ones that really make you care, ones that really make you feel something, and Donna's is the ultimate in that. Wilf, fantastic. It's not even really a goodbye. He just salutes the Doctor, but it's one of my favourite shots in all of Doctor Who. He gets some really great stuff in that episode, Wilf. And yeah, it's just a fantastic final scene between the two of them. There's nothing specific. He's not actually been a companion. He's really only travelled in the TARDIS the once, and he's never left. Well, he didn't leave Earth in the TARDIS. He did leave Earth, technically. He didn't leave Earth in the TARDIS. But it's a really nice final scene. The many exits of the Moffat companions are suddenly being thrust upon me here. I'm going to try and rattle through this as quickly as I possibly can. Cold Blood. Really, really good. Could be pushing into the fantastic tier. There's one line of dialogue where Rory goes, "But we were on the hill," and every single time it kind of breaks my heart. It's perfectly delivered by Arthur Darvill. I love that he sacrifices himself for the Doctor. I think that him being erased from time is brutal, and it's so incredibly well done. Obviously, it probably loses a bit because it's not the exit, and that's probably detracting from it a little bit. But I just think it's so well done. And it only lasts a couple of episodes, him being dead on this occasion. Rory did die quite a few times, but this is sort of the definitive one. This is not a dream. This is not an aborted reality. This is actually just he did in this point just die mid-adventure, and I remember watching it back in 2010 when it was the first series I'd ever watched, and I was getting comfortable. I was getting comfortable. The Doctor and companion are in danger. They'll be fine. Flipping what? What just happened? I think that's its advantage. To be totally honest with you, that feeling that you get when you watch that. God Complex. These are perfect. People don't talk about these enough. God Complex is an amazing story. Really is so good. And this exit, for the pair of them, I'm a little bit conflicted because it's not the end, but actually that's sort of the point. This is the Doctor giving them up before he has to stand over their graves, before he has to stand over Amy and Rory's bodies. And he fails. He fails to do that. He fails to let them go, and that's the point. He gives them the perfect ending. It's beautiful and it's heartfelt and it's underplayed. And it would have been a weird companion exit, considering the sort of companion exits that we'd got used to under the RTD era, where they were big and grand, and it's very underplayed. And there's a lovely final scene between Amy and the Doctor. But the fact that he fails, I think, actually makes it better, because he cannot give them up. He tries to do this in an act of selflessness to give up his friends, but he's selfish. He goes back to it, and the result is that they die in Angels Take Manhattan, which I've thrown in fantastic. Yes, there's some weird plot contrivances to mean that the Doctor can't go back. I don't care. I think it's brilliant. It hurts. It actually hurts me every time I watch it. Every time that she says a raggedy man and turns around and says goodbye, it hurts. PS also gives a fantastic send-off to Rory as well. That's technically extra canonical. I don't give a toss. It's brilliant. The many exits of Clara Oswald. Death in Heaven is good. I really like her exit in Death in Heaven. The fact that they both lie to each other for each other's own good is perfect, and it's so in character for the pair of them. I mean, even by the end of this story is acknowledging that this is not her actual exit, but it still feels worth talking about on this list because I think it's really well played. I love that final scene where they're saying thank you for how special you made me feel, how important you made me feel, and the Doctor just says thank you for exactly the same. There's a real understanding between those two characters. Capaldi and Coleman could sell anything. They're the best acting duo that this show has ever seen as Doctor and Companion. No contest. Not at all. They are insanely good. I think her best exit's Last Christmas. I think Last Christmas is imperfect. And again, this is weird because there's actually a few of these now where they're not the actual exits, they're fake out exits that were never really intended as the goodbye. Well, Last Christmas was written as a goodbye, but even by the time they filmed it, they knew Jenna Coleman was staying, but they kept it in. It's a beautiful last scene with old Clara, and the way that they mirror the events from the time of the Doctor with the cracker, and all the dialogue is just perfect. The acting is beautiful. It's just lovely, and the way that ties in with the theme of every Christmas is Last Christmas is it's just delightful. It really is. It's the sort of companion exit that I wish we'd had more of. Companions leaving, companions dying, even. Like we've seen that a lot, quite a lot. Something like this. If this was actually the way this ended, it would have just been beyond perfect. Face the Raven. Oh dear. We're now taking up the entire screen. Face the Raven is a really good story. I actually walked in on my brother watching this episode one time. He was absolutely bawling his eyes out. I've never seen him like that before. It's an incredible bit of TV. I think that her final scene is brilliant. Just Let Me Be Brave, and the way she walks out, it's really great stuff. It really is. I think her exit in Hellbent is not quite as good. I'm going to chuck it in serviceable. I like Hellbent more than a lot of people like Hellbent. I think it's got some really strong points to it. But Clara should have gone back to Gallifrey, and the story should have ended with her going back to the moment of her death. It should still have been definitive. It should still have been final. The Doctor should not have been able to gain any reward from what he did in Hellbent. I love it as a story of the Doctor going too far to save his companion out of rage and anger, even post the event. Brilliant stuff. But the whole she gets to go off traveling with Ashildr for the rest of history thing, nonsense. So I'm very mixed in it. I still like the performances, and I think that really that would be bad on its own. To be honest, I really don't like that element. But the final scenes between her and Capaldi and the way they play with him losing his memory of her, as opposed to all these times in the past with Jamie and Zoe and Donna, where we've watched that exact scenario play out the other way round. I think that's an excellent decision from Stephen Moffat. Played really well and basically saves this exit, because I was kind of seriously slagging off if they just did the she goes off traveling forever trope that Moffat so loves to do. And he also did with Bill Potts, who's not next, apparently. I can't see who's next anymore. River Song. I don't know what to count as her exit, because she does die, and we have one story that was just Plans Library Forest of the Dead, but I'm not counting that as her exit, even though technically it's her last story. But actually, technically, Name of the Doctor takes place after she's in the library, but I'm counting The Husbands of River Song, and The Husbands of River Song is a delightful story. It's funny, it's joyous, it's warm, and I love those final scenes together as they're watching the Singing Towers of Darillium. Alex Kingston and Peter Capaldi nail it, and then the way it cuts to the snow and they both lived happily, and then it's sort of the different words fall off, and then it's just and they both lived, and it just cuts to happily. It's just I don't know, it just works for me. It's possibly cheesy, but it's Christmas. It's injected in my veins. It's flipping brilliant. Really strong exit. Really strong. I don't know why I said injected to my veins. Nardole in The Doctor Falls. Good. Underplayed. Really nice exit. Brilliant rapport between him and Capaldi. There was never going to be a way that these two were going to go out and it wouldn't be with some nice jokes. Bill in The Doctor Falls is fantastic. Am I going to go with that? Yeah. Yes, I know. I feel like it would be perfect if it wasn't for the she comes back as a the flip is she like a puddle? I don't know. But if it wasn't for that element, it would have been perfect because this is a brutal story for a companion gets totally, totally terrorized for a decade, turned into a Cyberman, which means they get cut up and mutilated. It's violent. It's a vile fate. And the fact the Doctor promises to save her and he can't. I just wish that he actually couldn't. Well, I know he didn't, but someone else did. I just wish that element wasn't in the story. If this had just ended with Bill dying on the battlefield with Capaldi, this would be untouchable. It really would. It's that good. Where at its fundamental core of the premise, it's that good. What have we got here? Bill, Twice Upon a Time. And I suppose at the same time we should talk about Nardole, Twice Upon a Time, because it's the same. It's the same. Goodbye, really. I've got a lot in that fantastic tier. This is more about a goodbye to Capaldi, really, for the pair of them. They're back, they're nice, they have some really good scenes, but it's that final scene where they're on the battlefield that really gets me every single time when they have the hug and then the pair of them dissolve and Capaldi's just left in tatters on an empty battlefield. I know that's all about him, and I'm slightly projecting something better onto Bill and Nardole than they actually got given. But it just works for me. It just works. Now we've got Graham and Ryan. We haven't got Dan and Yaz. I'm going to tell you where we're going to put Dan and Yaz. Dan gets put in, well, we could basically get put in non-applicable, but Dan gets put in meh because he just sort of decides to leave. Now that was probably for a whole host of behind the scenes reasons. Fine. Wasn't particularly attached to Dan. Frankly, I wasn't particularly attached to any of the Chibnall companions, but wasn't hugely attached to Dan. That's all right. Yaz, I really liked Part of the Doctor, but one thing that sits so weirdly with me is her exit. Because like she says that she has a line of dialogue where she says, I don't want this to end. And then the 13th Doctor says something along the lines of, I think I have to do this alone. So it's like she just gets kicked out of the TARDIS because the Doctor wants to regenerate and sort of have a clean slate. That plays weirdly to me. They might as well have said, well, sorry, but the next showrunner that doesn't want to keep you on, your contract's up, goodbye. So that particular element, so I would put both of them in meh. I really like Yaz's last scene, but it plays weirdly for me, and Dan doesn't really have a goodbye. Ryan and Graham. Ryan's in bad for a number of reasons. I do like his final bit on the bike when he falls off. A number of reasons. They try and have a scene between him and the 13th Doctor in the story, and it falls flat on its face because these characters have never really interacted before, even though they've been traveling together for like 2 years, and that just plays so weirdly for me. The fact that he says he wants to stay because his mates need him, but then immediately they say, you know, they get given passports and they're going to go around the world and try and help things. Like, are you staying to go on holiday or are you staying to go with your mates? And the fact that I just don't buy Tosin Cole's acting. I've tried to be as fair-minded as possible. I don't normally say people are bad actors because I'm not a professional actor, and who am I to judge these actors? But he's just so wooden in this role. I've never seen him in anything else. He might be good, and I get the impression he didn't particularly love being on the show, hence why he didn't come back or do a lot of press with it. Doesn't really seem to want to do. I can't imagine him ever being someone who does convention or, you know, is the he's like the anti Mandip Gill, basically. But there's just nothing in that final scene for him. In fact, the person who gets all the good stuff in that final scene is Graham. Now, it's nothing better than serviceable, but this is still the best companion of the Chibnall era, and he gets the best companion exit of the Chibnall era. And I think it's because he decides to stay with Ryan, which is integral to his arc. But again, it feels like all the growth in that arc was Graham's, not Ryan's. There are bits of it I really like, but I still think that I really wish that someone in this era had a better exit. Graham's exit is just fine, and I feel sad because I don't get Bradley Walsh making smarmy jokes. But I just didn't feel anything. The specific scene where she hugs them and there's that shot, and then she says something like "my fam." Well, there's the fact that I absolutely despise the fact that the Doctor uses that word, and I am convinced that this will date. You think the 60s Doctor Who is dated because of some of the effects. The use of the word fam will date the Chibnall era like milk. It really will. It's cringy and it doesn't work for me. But so many companion exits have. I mean, look how many I've got on these top two columns. There's been some brilliant companion exits. And yeah, that's the end of my video. I hope to be doing a video on the first and second Doctor's era at some point, because I'm currently in the middle of rewatching. I've just got a couple of Troughton era stories left to go. Thank you for watching, and if I didn't get another video out, Merry Christmas. I hate saying that. I absolutely hate it. I'm such a Grinch. I really despised saying that.